Welcome to the Just Because Diaries, where real life meets random chats and plenty of mom moments, all while reclaiming joy in the seemingly mundane. I'm Celeste, a mom but also a whole-ass person, navigating the balance of motherhood while rediscovering the joy in doing things just for myself. From the chaos of parenting to the little moments that make life fun, nothing is off limits. So grab a cup of coffee or something stronger and let's get into it. Today, I'm sharing the story of how I followed my curiosity all the way to a butcher shop in Sicily just because I was convinced that they were my long-lost relatives. And later, a listener submitted Just Because moment packed with tiny, whimsical habits you can steal for your own life. No international travel required. A few years ago, I went to Italy looking for my extended family because I was hoping to gather information to eventually qualify for Italian citizenship. And I may or may not have actually found some, but I'm still unsure. Fast forward about 10 years later, and I suddenly had all this access to real information about my great-grandfather, who was the last relative born in Italy. Only I discovered that he was not what I thought at all, but he was family nonetheless, and he was my only way of possibly qualifying for Italian citizenship through descent. Having Italian citizenship has kind of been a pipe dream of mine for a while now, until last weekend. Italy's courts decided to uphold a decision that they made last year in 2025 that officially ends citizenship through descent claims through great-grandparents. Hooray! Before their ruling in 2025, it was totally possible to claim Italian citizenship through your great-grandparents, or even earlier ancestors in some very rare cases. And it might not have been the easiest process in the world, but it definitely wasn't impossible. But then that all changed last year with their new law. The ruling went back to the courts to see if it was constitutional, and as of last weekend, they decided to uphold it. So that's pretty much the final nail in the coffin for people like me who were hoping to pursue citizenship through a great-grandparent. Cue the Pac-Man death sound. That's super niche reference, but if you know, you know, and it's fully appropriate. But even though citizenship is now officially off the table, I couldn't help but think back on this ancestry journey that I've been on for probably close to 15 years now. So, in honor of my new ineligibility for Italian citizenship, today I want to take you on a little adventure to Sicily, back to the day I decided to go looking for my family. As I've mentioned before, I studied abroad in Italy, and while I was there, I had hoped that I would be able to visit Sicily, which is where we know my great-grandfather was from. Which part of Sicily, we weren't sure at all, but being young and naive, I thought I would just follow my curiosity and figure it out when I got there. But I ended up not getting the chance to go there because there was volcanic activity of some sort, so that stopped me from visiting. However, a few years later, I was dating David and we were planning a vacation to Italy. I made sure that Sicily would be on the itinerary because I was not going to be in Italy a second time and not go there. And David was totally down for my crazy ancestry mission. So I decided that we'd stay in Palermo because my dad had a general idea that his grandfather was from around there. So I figured that would be a good place to start. Well, as luck would have it, I was doing some internet searching and I came across a butcher shop in a small town outside of Palermo called Macelleria Giamo. Giamo being my family's last name. And I totally freaked out because Giamo is highly uncommon. So I figured that these people must be related to me. Plus, my great-grandfather had a butcher shop that my grandpa then took over. So it felt like a sign that this tiny little Italian butcher shop would belong to my distant Italian family. Now, did I reach out to the butcher shop at all and let them know that I was coming or even ask them if or how we might be related? No, I did not. I just booked David and I a couple of bus tickets to their small village and we were off to go knock on their butcher shop door. Except that not being fluent in Italian and super unfamiliar with the Italian public transit system, I completely missed our bus stop. And we ended up getting off at a hospital that was a solid few miles outside of the village. Thankfully, we met a very kind English-speaking stranger who worked at the hospital, and he gave us a ride into town. I don't recommend getting into cars with total strangers. And I won't lie that I was scared the entire time we were in the car, but he ended up being totally harmless, super kind, and he left us right outside of the butcher shop. And he even said that he would wait to make sure that we were able to find someone so that we wouldn't be stranded. Super, super nice. So shout out to Stefano if you happen to ever hear this. Well, David and I walked right up to the butcher shop only to realize that it was closed because it was the middle of the afternoon and a lot of Italian shops close in the afternoon, kind of like a siesta. But I did see a woman inside, so I waved and she came over and I introduced myself and I tried my best to explain in super broken Italian who I was and why I was there. Her name was Loritza, and thankfully she was the nicest woman in the world and she welcomed us into the shop. As soon as we walked in, I had this immediate sense of like pride, I guess I can call it. I never met my great grandfather, of course, but I also never got to meet my grandpa because he passed away long before I was born. But standing in that butcher shop, I just felt really close to my grandpa, almost like he was there with me in a weird way. Like it was a glimpse into what his life might have been like in his own butcher shop in Amsterdam, New York. It was just a really nice feeling of belonging, I think. While I was having my moment in the butcher shop, Loritza was explaining that she was the wife of Giuseppe, or Pino as he preferred to be called, and he was the owner of the butcher shop and my potential Giamo family member. But Pino wasn't there when we got there, but she said he was coming soon, and it wasn't long before he appeared in the most Italian way ever on a tiny little Vespa. Just to add a little more whimsy to this whole experience. Loritza then explained to Pino who I was and what I was doing there, and then Pino started to tell me a little bit about his family history. Now, everything was being said in Italian. They spoke exactly zero English. But thankfully, I had my Google Translate app, so I was able to pick up what they were saying and I was able to respond appropriately because shockingly, the Italian classes that I took only covered conversational Italian and not things like how to explain your family's entire ancestral lineage in great detail. Pino and Loritza were the most kind people that I have ever met. I was a total stranger to them. I was literally some random person off the street with my boyfriend in tow, but they didn't seem to mind or even care. Instead, they offered to take us for coffees, which of course we graciously accepted, and soon we were in their car zipping around the really teeny tiny narrow streets of their village. I mean, we had already survived driving in a car with a stranger once that day, so what was another time? On the way to the cafe, Pino took us all around the village. He pointed out various monuments and shrines. He really just took us all around the town like we were actual family in town visiting. And we did stop a couple of times so he could point out really beautiful views and so that we could take some pictures. It was literally a dream. I couldn't believe that that was happening to us. And when we finally arrived to the cafe, it was yet another dream come true because it was full of the most amazing and beautiful Italian pastries that I have ever seen. It smelled amazing in there. It was this perfect mix of coffee and the pastries, and oh God, it was just the most beautiful smell. And much to my surprise and total delight, Pino ordered one of just about everything they had in the case for David and I to enjoy because he was insistent that they had the best pastries in all of Italy and that we couldn't leave without trying them all. So we happily gorged ourselves on every single delicious bite. As we ate, we talked about each of our families, and at some point in the conversation, I gathered that while Pino was a Giamo, there were two Giamo families that existed in Sicily, and he was from one line, and he guessed that I was from another. I still never figured out exactly how that worked, or if that was even true, but he was very certain that I was not of his familial line. But I keep hoping that someday he or one of his kids or grandkids will do their ancestry DNA, and then they'll just pop up in my tree as a relative. Eventually, the food and coffees were finished, and Loritza and Pino left us off at the bus stop so that we could go back to Palermo. And I remember sitting on that bus, reflecting back on that day with David, and I felt so whole. I couldn't believe that the day we just had happened. I couldn't believe the kindness of these absolute strangers. It was a day and an adventure that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And honestly, God bless David for just being there along for the ride, because he doesn't speak any Italian at all. And he had no idea what was being said most of the time that day, even with Google Translate in the mix. He was just an absolute legend the entire time. I can fully recognize how lucky I was with that whole experience. I know that moments like that are super rare for anyone who is trying to learn more about their family heritage. And even though I really learned nothing from the experience in terms of my distant family, except that Pinot might not be my family, I still came away from it with this feeling of wanting to know more about our family. And I think that's a totally human thing to want to know, like our origin stories or where we come from, especially as an American. I think it's definitely a very American thing since almost all of our families originate from somewhere else. And I also think that it's super easy to romanticize ancestry and this idea that somewhere out there our people exist, or at least like knowledge of our people. And it's super fun to think about belonging somewhere else in some distant mystical land. Even now, I think about my potential distant family members living in Italy and having this wonderful, whimsical life in this quaint little village when really they're just living life like we do every day, going to work and raising kids, running errands. They're living completely normal, everyday lives. I know for me, there was a yearning for that whimsical image I have of my distant family. I want to feel connected to that way of life, even though it's something I know that I've partially invented in my mind. And I think that many of us, myself included, carry this quiet little hope that somewhere in our ancestry, there's a story that explains us, which is why my search for our family information never really ended. But I did learn that sometimes the deeper you dig into your roots, the messier the story becomes. After my Macelleria Giamo adventure, a lot of years passed before I really started digging into our ancestry again. But I was really happy to find that for some reason, during those years that had passed, there was so much more information available about our family. I did most of my research on FamilySearch.org, which is an incredible resource if you are hoping to look into your ancestry at all. The amount of documents they have is staggering, and it is so cool to look at them and all of the old writing, and I just love it. I was looking at documents that were 100 plus years old from my family, and it's just really fun if you're into that sort of thing. So, thanks to all of this new information I was finding, the more I searched, the more I learned, and the closer I got to finding my great-grandfather's birth record. But one day I was telling my dad about all of the stuff I was finding about my great-grandfather and how cool it all was. And then my dad began to tell us stories of his grandfather, and it turns out that my great-grandfather was a total dick. First of all, he was super mean to my dad for no reason. My dad had so many stories of his grandpa just being an asshole. And then there was also this like family scandal that I had always known about, but for some reason I never connected the dots to my great grandfather. But he was the center of the whole scandal. So the dude was a total dick. And that was disappointing to learn and totally took a bit of the wind out of my sails and honestly kind of cracked this whole fantasy that I had built in my head around my great grandfather. It was like turning the lights on in the club and realizing that the hot dude your friend was dancing with is actually not nearly as hot as she had thought. For years, I had imagined this romantic story about my great grandfather leaving Sicily and building a life in the United States for his family. I imagined this hardworking butcher with this rich family history behind him. And maybe parts of that story are true, but like most family stories, the reality is a lot more complicated than the version we tell ourselves. But what's funny is that when I think back on my search for my ancestry, my favorite memory isn't about him at all. It doesn't even involve him. It's about two complete strangers in a tiny Sicilian village who welcomed me into their butcher shop, drove me around their town, and bought me more pastries than any human should reasonably consume in one sitting. They didn't know me. They didn't owe me anything, and yet they treated me like family anyway. So even though Italian citizenship is officially off the table now, I still got something pretty special out of the whole search anyway, and I think that's the part of this story that feels the most meaningful to me now. Because maybe belonging isn't always about bloodlines or citizenship paperwork or great-grandparents. It's possible that sometimes belonging just looks like kindness from strangers in a butcher shop in Sicily. I hope since last episode's Just Because moment, you have all been practicing your whimsical Victorian slang. I know I have. I have been putting giggle mug to especially good use. But today, in keeping with our whimsy in the everyday theme, I am bringing you something listener submitted. Some of you have been DMing me whimsy-related posts, which I have been loving, so please keep them coming. And this week, I would like to send a big thank you to Julia, who sent me a post where someone on TikTok asked, "Girlies, what are some things you do to be more whimsical? I love knowing about cute little habits." So today I am going to share some of the comments answering that question. They are silly, they are magical, and you can easily apply any of these to your everyday life for a little bit of extra whimsy. So here we go. First up, this woman commented, "I tell my hamster not to answer the door for anyone before I leave." I love this one. I do something similar with my pets. Before I let our dog Sylvie outside in the morning, I tell her to be the best girl she can be and to look out for the little creatures, which for a dog who literally never listens to me, I think that one actually stuck because no one loves to watch squirrels more than Sylvie. And she's this big old husky dog. And then when we leave the house, I tell our bunny Winston to look after Sylvie for us, and then I leave classical music on for them so that they can feel cultured. I'm sure that all of you pet owners out there have your own little whimsical rituals with your pets, so I would love to hear what you are telling your pets before you leave the house. This one I thought was super sweet and clever. One woman said that she listens to French music in her headphones while grocery shopping. She said that it makes shopping more romantic and less mundane feeling. Love that. It is so simple, and I can imagine doing that in my head, and it's already making me feel a little fancy. I love it. I think this one is insanely relatable for all of us moms out there. One woman says, "Well, good thing no one overreacted," out loud to herself after a good cry. I love this so much. It just kind of adds some levity to harder moments, and it feels like it would be a good reminder in those moments to not take ourselves so seriously. I mean, sometimes I cry about really, really stupid shit, so I will be keeping this one in my back pocket for sure. This woman holds what she calls office hours every Tuesday at a local coffee shop where she literally just sits on a couch and orders drinks for 4 to 5 hours while her friends and family or whoever comes to visit her and chat. I love this for her, and I think that you could easily add on to it as well. Like, if it were me, I would bring a crochet project and I would invite people who are coming to see me to bring a craft or something that they're working on. Bring your sourdough starter. I don't care. But that said, I don't have enough friends or acquaintances to make that one a reality. I would probably be out of there in 30 minutes. But if you do, this might be a really good one. Surprisingly, there were several comments that involved inanimate objects, which is fun. One woman said she tells her dishes that it's bath time. Another says, "Can you please hold this?" when she sets her purse on any kind of table or chair. Along similar lines, one woman says, "May I take your coat?" while she peels garlic. And another woman says, "M'lady," every time she walks by a mirror. The m'lady one really cracks me up for some reason. I don't know why. I just love that. But all of these are very Beauty and the Beast enchanted castle-esque, and I love them for that reason. Next, we have a woman who said that she calls her to-do list her ta-da list, and she does jazz hands every time she checks something off. This is amazing, and I think I will for sure need to adopt it, especially when my to-do list includes super fun things like mopping floors and cleaning bathtubs, which are on my list for tomorrow. So jazz hands it will be. And finally, our last one that I just adore. This woman is a hairstylist and says that whenever she washes her clients' hair as she's giving them a head massage, she sends loving thoughts into the universe over whatever is going on in their life. I thought this was so beautiful. It's such a simple little act, but it is so incredibly meaningful and just really thoughtful, and I love it. So there you have it, some really simple and potentially really fun ways to add a bit of whimsy to your everyday life, submitted by people who are already doing them. And I would love to know, do you have a bit of everyday whimsy that you would like to share? I would love to hear about it, so feel free to shoot me an email to thejustbecausediaries@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Just Because Diaries. I love reading your emails, so shoot me a message anytime about anything to thejustbecausediaries@gmail.com, and you may just be mentioned in a future episode. Also, give me a follow on Instagram at thejustbecausediaries. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could please take a few seconds to rate and review my podcast by hitting that 5-star button and leaving me a little love note in the review section. And please share this episode with a friend who you think might enjoy being part of this budding community. Thank you so much again for listening. I so appreciate you being here, and I'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.